Hi everyone. If you can see me and I'm live, let me know. Thumbs up or say hi in the chat so I can see if you're there or not. Hi Louise. Hi Molly. Hi Risa. Hi Zoe, how are you? Good afternoon. It's afternoon, evening time here in the UK, and then probably afternoonish time in the States. Hi Bella. Hi Jane. Hi Nan. Hi Carly. Hi Heather. Hi Jenna. Hi Laura. Hi Emily. Hi Magali. Hi Diane. Hi Maria. So today we have another video. I thought we could go through and spend Sunday night with Skinner again. So if you guys saw last week's one, then welcome back. If this is your first one, hopefully you guys enjoy it. If you didn't catch last week's one, you'd like to watch it, it's on my Facebook page or it's on my YouTube channel, so you can go check it out. Lots of hellos. Oh, we have a hello from Australia as well. Hi Jenny from Australia. Hi James. Hi Sylvia. Hi Claudine. Hi Joe. Hi Katie. Hi Gemma. Hi Lucy. Hi Kirsty. Hi Elizabeth. Hi Katie from Northumberland. Hi Penny. Hi Tracy. Hi Colette. Hello, 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 everyone. Welcome. So exciting to have you here. I'm going to load up the video. So let's find. So if you want a hashtag, guys, I've been using hashtag thank you Skinner, and you can hashtag me as well. So if you want to quote anything from the stuff that we watched today. And the video we're going to watch today is called Learning and Behavior Conquest from 1959. So that's about 60 something years ago, 62-ish years ago. I actually calculated that, so it's not that I'm really clever or anything that I managed to work out on the spot. Okay, if I wouldn't have said that, it would have sounded more clever. And so it's on the BF Skinner Foundation YouTube channel. If you guys want to see it, I'll post a link in the descriptions later. So you can go watch the original video if you would like to. And then also wanted to mention that if you haven't seen this website, the BF Skinner Foundation website, would highly recommend it. There's loads of resources on there. A lot of Skinner's books are on there, and you can pay whatever you can afford from 99 cents. So you can pay 99 cents, you can pay $1, a pound, 50 pence, whatever it is that you can afford, and you can download the PDF. So if you want to read any of the original works, then they've got articles and lots of other things on there as well. And they've also opened up a new little membershipy type thing. It's free of charge. You can go on the website, you can register, and then you can access sort of this new forum-y type design where you can watch some interviews, you can chat to other people, and do that. So I would highly recommend going and visiting the BF Skinner Foundation. And if you want to make a donation to the foundation, it is a charity, you can do that too. And it's there to kind of archive and make available all of Skinner's works. Okay, and then one other thing I wanted to mention. So today's video shows some of Skinner's training with pigeons. And obviously when you watch the pigeons, there's nothing horrific. Well, it depends on your definition of horrific, I suppose. But if you like, the pigeons are there, there's no voluntarily step up type behaviors and all the things that we teach now. So the video is, as we said, 60 years old. And so if the pigeons may be like trying to catch the pigeon in the box or putting the pigeon, like there's a scene where they're going to be looking at how to study potential emotions, and essentially the pigeons are taught to peck each other and aggress towards each other. So there's a couple of scenes. If it upsets you, I'll let you know when they appear. You don't have to watch. And I know it's not the same welfare and ethical standards that we would use today, but remember, this is from 60 years ago, and it would be bad to just go, well, I don't agree with the ethics in what they were doing 60 years ago, so I'm not going to use it, or I'm not going to watch it, I'm not going to listen to it. The animals went through that, so we might as well use the information that we have and we've learned from it. Okay, let's see if I can pull up this video. There we go. Let's take away the welfare warning. Let's check our chat and see how that's going. Liz goes, it's 72 years ago. Thank you, Liz. Hi, Jody. Hi, Alexa. Hi, Mary. Hi, Hannah. Okay, perfect. So let's go. If you guys have any comments, post below, and hopefully I'll see them. We can stop. We can have a chat about things. I'm not an expert on Skinner. I'm not an expert on his work. I love reading and learning about Skinner's work and behavior analysis and behavior science and radical behaviorism. And so I'm not here to be an expert on the topic. I just think it's a good thing we can watch together, and we can stop and discuss things. I'll share my opinion, obviously. And so, yeah, let's go.
Fine. Apple. Apple.
This child is using a unique new educational device. From matching geometric forms, she goes on to match letters of the alphabet. She's teaching herself to read. This pigeon is matching the same geometric forms that the child matched.
So, first question, can you guys hear and see? If you could just type yes in the chat box if you can see or hear, or no, it would be good information. Thank you very much. I'm seeing some yeses come in. Amazing. And then the next thing is, we talked about this last week, so I'm not going to go on about it again this week, but where he talks about the idea that the child is teaching herself to, or himself to read or learn. The child isn't teaching himself, essentially. The feedback from the machine and the interaction with the environment is what's shaping that child's behavior. And so if you're more interested in that discussion, we talked a little bit about self-control, impulse control, self-control type behaviors last week. So you can go and watch that video.
Also learning a new skill, child and pigeon. Today we shall find out what they have in common and see how a pigeon can help us penetrate the mysteries of human behavior.
Conquest, the search for new knowledge about our universe, our world, and ourselves.
I'm Charles Collingwood. This is Harvard University's Psychological Laboratories. What is the...
Molly, I've got the volume up as loud as I can put it. I'm not sure if you're able to go any louder on your side. If it's a universal problem and lots of people are finding that it's very quiet, then say so in the comments and we'll try something else. But it may be worth using AirPods or earphones as well. Nikki says, my volume has increased when I made it full screen, so maybe try that one. Thank you, Nikki, for your input.
Behavior. What makes a man love, gamble, write a sonnet? In this laboratory, scientists seek answers to those questions using pigeons to stand in for human beings in their experiments. We'll watch science exploring the control of behavior in just a moment. This is Dr. B.F. Skinner, professor of psychology at Harvard. His area of particular interest is behavior. Dr. Skinner, what are you doing with this pigeon?
I'm getting ready to demonstrate a fundamental principle of behavior. The apparatus is quite simple, but the principle is far-reaching, not only in explaining the behavior of pigeons, but in analyzing human behavior. This pigeon is hungry, and I can give it food just by pressing this switch, which operates a small food dish back of the square opening in the wall.
Okay, so last week we did talk about the idea of what do we mean by hungry, what does it look like, and talking about the idea of motivating operations. If you go and have a look at that video, then again, we talked about MOs, what they mean, and I gave some examples relating to dogs and different animals, I think, and so that will give you an idea. But essentially, how can we measure hunger and then go, okay, so under these conditions, this is the influence on behavior, and that's what Skinner was trying to do as well, operationalize it. Oh, the other thing which is interesting is, from what I hear, is the idea that, so we're talking about fundamental principles, and so these are things that can be applied to all behavior, and we're not necessarily talking about just pigeon behavior or rat behavior or child behavior. So we're talking about the underlying principles that kind of cover all of those different species and organisms. And you can imagine how at the time when Skinner was doing this research or started, and also now when people would look at this, how quick or easy it would be to go, well, it's a pigeon. Why would you learn anything from a pigeon? Or how could we learn anything from a rat? I'm not a rat. I'm way more sophisticated than a rat. And so you've got that idea and that sort of hill or mountain almost to get over sometimes, in terms of for people to kind of go, hold on a second, we're looking at these principles, and then can we take these principles into the field and see if they still hold up, which they do.
The principle I want to demonstrate is called reinforcement. It's what the layman usually calls reward, although that term doesn't fit too comfortably in many applications. This point is a quite simple one. Whatever the pigeon is doing, when I press this switch, it will tend to do again. And in that way, I can select parts of its behavior and make it do practically anything I like.
Well, now,
so let's just stop there for a second. I'll go back a couple of seconds and play the clip again without keep interrupting it, so you can see it without the interruption. But I think there are a couple of points there that are worth maybe mentioning or talking about. And so one of the first points was the Skinner was talking about the idea of differences between rewards and reinforcements, or you could use those words kind of, some people use them interchangeably. And I think the important thing here is, if you're watching and you're a behavior geek, or you're watching and you're at say you're someone who is working in the field with other scientists or other professionals, and then you also work with your everyday caregiver, you're going to adjust your wording so that it's relatable to the person you're working with. So your approximations, or which words you use, how you arrange the learning environment for your human learner, is really important. And you do that with your verbal behavior too. So if I'm with a human, with a client, and if I start talking about reinforcement, it may be something that doesn't mean anything to them. It may be such a long word that is just too much. And whereas if I talk about the idea of rewards, they're like, oh, okay, I'm with you now. And so when we use words, we have to relate them, whether we're talking to the client or whether we're talking to another professional. And we want to be understanding what the words mean, but be able to use them comfortably in different situations. Now, when we talk about the idea of a reward is usually some kind of token or gesture that you give, and it's not necessarily contingent on a behavior closely timed. So you do really good work, so you hand in some work that you expected to do at work for your boss, and straight away you're given this reward. Often there's a delay, maybe a week, maybe a month, and the reward doesn't necessarily function to make that behavior more likely to occur in the future. Whereas when we talk about a reinforcer or the process of reinforcement, we're talking about the idea where a change in the environment following a behavior, as the behavior is occurring, and it's usually short time delays, so as immediately as possible as to when the behavior is occurring, that change in the environment is what we call a reinforcer, and it acts to make the behavior more likely to occur again in the future. And so when we talk about reinforcers, we say, I gave my dog a sausage, or I just reinforced my dog. How do we know whether we've reinforced our dog's behavior or whether we've just given a token or a reward? So essentially, until we observe behavior and we monitor to see what's happening with that behavior or some dimension of that behavior, whether that behavior is changing in latency, duration, rate, into response time, and if we notice there's changes in some dimension of that behavior, we can go, okay, that piece of hot dog is functioning as a reinforcer. But potentially up until then, it could just be a reward, just some kind of token that you give. And so we need to be watching and to be able to see whether something we give is actually functioning as a reinforcer or not. Just having a look at the comments while I do this. So Alexis says, yes, reward doesn't always equal reinforcement. And I think that's really important for us to remember. And with our clients, it doesn't necessarily, we don't have to go into this. So with a client, I might say something along the lines of, we want to reward your parrot's behavior when your parrot is sitting quietly as opposed to screaming. Now, the reward that you give should be something that makes it worthwhile for your parrot to repeat that behavior in the future. So for example, if I ask you to do some work for me and I pay you with a £10 note, but you've spent 2 hours doing this work, you may not come back and do more work for me. Whereas if I paid you with £50 note or maybe £100, you'd be more likely to come back and offer to do more work for me in the future. In that way, we want to make sure our reward is something that encourages that behavior to happen again. So I might break it down in that way for my client, as opposed to go into detailed information about reinforcement and things like that. Now, the other thing that we hear in this video is Skinner talking about selection. And so later on in his work, so when he first started his research and publishing information, he was talking about operant conditioning, but not necessarily looking at it as a mode of selection. But later on in his works, he starts referring to operant conditioning as a type of selection. So we have natural selection, Darwinian selection, and that's something where phenotypic selection based on genes, and you select over generations. And so you're not necessarily going to be able to go within the lifetime of one individual animal. So within the lifetime of this cat, natural selection isn't going to play a massive role in helping the cat survive day to day. Whereas over generations, that natural selection is going to be playing a role in helping that lineage of cats be able to be most adaptable to the environments as the environments change. So you have natural selection, Darwinian selection, but you need a mechanism that's occurring alongside this to be able to have change within the individual within their lifetime. So moment to moment change. And so Skinner started referring to a second kind of selection. And he talked about this as being selection by consequences, essentially what we call operant conditioning. So our first type of selection is natural selection. Second type of selection that Skinner proposed was something that evolved alongside, sort of in line with natural selection, and that was selection by consequences. And that's selecting behaviors within the lifetime of that individual organism. And so you're able to see a change, because the environment isn't just changing over generations, but you might be born, and a tortoise or a human, even an animal who is living just for a few weeks, there's going to be changes in the environment. And potentially, if the environment changes significantly, that the animal isn't adapted to be able to, from a natural selection point of view, survive, there needs to be a mechanism to allow that individual to be able to survive. And that is selection by consequences. So as the environment starts selecting behaviors that are more advantageous to that environment, you end up basically shaping behavior. And then Skinner also talked about a third type of selection, which he called cultural selection within cultures. And one way to look at this is essentially you're looking at selection by sort of contingency setting groups. And so as groups come together, and there's certain laws or certain things that are considered culturally acceptable and not acceptable, they start to become punishing and reinforcing certain stimuli because of how that group sees it, and that might differ between different cultures, and then that also selects behavior. And so Skinner talks about these different types of levels of selection. And if you are interested in learning more about this, then a reference for this is Skinner's paper called Selection by Consequences, which was published in Behavioral and Brain Sciences. And so if you want to have a look at that, then I put the link there. I did also do some research before we did this live feed, and it is a paper that you have to normally pay for if you want to access, unless you can access certain journals. But I did find that if you go to this link, you can download it free. So here's a link that you can download that paper if you want, and it should download free of charge. So let's see what comments we have. Cheryl, Murphy, Diane and Catherine, you guys have typed something, but in my chat box, it's just come up as blank. Oh, you guys are sending stars. I don't quite know what the stars are, but it says sent 150 stars, Catherine. Diane sent 150 stars, and Cheryl sent 150 stars. Thank you very much for whatever stars are. I will do some research and look that up. But that is very kind of you. I appreciate it very much. Okay, so let's carry on. Let's get rid of this. I'm just going to go back a little bit so that you guys can watch a little bit of that clip without me talking through it.
Whatever the pigeon is doing, when I press this switch, it will tend to do again. And in that way, I can select parts of its behavior and make it do practically anything I like.
Well, now, what sort of thing can you make the pigeon do with this form of reward or reinforcement?
I'll try to turn the bird around counterclockwise toward you. Every time it moves its head around this way toward you, I'll pick that up. And with a little luck, we ought to have a complete turn in very little time. I'm waiting until the head moves this way and then reinforcing. I want to wait for a somewhat bigger turn. That's enough, I think. It takes a little skill to anticipate just the movement that you want to reinforce, because this must occur at the very moment of the response. We're getting the beginnings of a counterclockwise turn. There we are.
Yeah. Come on, Pigeon.
A little bit more and he'll go all the way around, I think.
There, I made it. That didn't take him very long, Dr.
No,
Skinner.
that's pretty fair. It varies a good deal because, of course, I have just the movement that you want to reinforce because this must occur.
Okay, so I'm going to go back a couple of seconds so we can chat about stuff. Okay, so just going to look at the comments. So Kamora says you get money from the stars. That is very kind of you. There's really no need to pay any kind of money for this. It's a pleasure that you guys are here chatting through this, but thank you very, very much. Okay, Diane says, oh, clever pigeon. I love watching animals with what we are asking for. Okay, so when we watch that pigeon, let's go and see what Skinner was saying for a second.
I'll try to turn the bird around counterclockwise toward you. Every time it moves its head around this way toward you, I'll pick that up. And with a little luck, we ought to have a complete turn in very little time. I'm waiting until the head moves this way and then reinforcing. I want to wait for a somewhat bigger turn. That's enough, I think.
So while I'm watching this is really interesting because you hear Skinner go, so I want to wait for a bigger turn. I think that's enough. And what that's telling us is that he is observing behavior, gathering data, and then changing his steps. And so I think this is enough. And you're using behavior and observations from behavior in the environment previously, if you've worked with this learner before, and observing baseline, how the learner moves and stuff. But in the moment, you have to be watching what the animal's doing to decide whether you lower or you reduce your criteria, essentially.
Takes a little skill to anticipate just the movement that you want to reinforce.
Anticipate the movement that you want to reinforce. And so you hear trainers say you need to just kind of anticipate it as it's happening or before it's happening, because by the time you press that click or by the time you deliver that reinforcer, you might be changing what you're reinforcing. And so that watching that timing, and especially in a behavior like this, which is a movement behavior, you potentially want to make sure you're getting movement, because if you just have a bird standing and you've just got a head turn, you could probably just get this head turning behavior and get stuck at that. And I see that happen a lot, is sometimes when we're teaching dogs or different animals to do a movement behavior, you want to make sure you're reinforcing movement. Yes, this is movement, but if you want everything to move with it, the legs and the rest of the body, then this really quickly you have to arrange the environment so that movement occurs, because otherwise you get stuck with an animal whose feet are planted and their head is just going like this and up and down and side to side. So it's a really good thing to try.
Because this must occur at the very moment of the response.
So Skinner isn't talking about using a clicker, but often when trainers talk about, I hear trainers go, oh, this new age training, who needs a clicker? But there's nothing new aged about it, and it's not about a clicker per se. It's about a marker and a condition reinforcer, and understanding what a marker is. So a condition reinforcer is something that a condition meaning learnt, reinforcer meaning a stimulus, a change in the environment that strengthens behavior. So something that is that doesn't do it naturally, but by learning the stimulus change. So stimulus is just a change in the environment. The stimulus now functions to strengthen behavior. So the click doesn't mean anything. You pair it with click food, click food, click food, and suddenly the click takes on value. It can do things that it couldn't do before. So potentially the sound of a click can reinforce behavior, make behavior stronger. And then it's conditioned, because I said it's like I said, it's learned, it's taught. And then it doesn't have to be, like I said, a click. It can be the sound of the magazine in this situation, that sound when he presses the button as the food is dispensed. If there's a light change, so there's a light that goes on and off, that could function as a clicker, a marker signal. So we've got that side. So if we look at the marker signal from the ABCs, your antecedent, your behavior, consequences, you can look at the behavior occurs, there's a click or a marker, and that's in your consequence box, and we've just discussed that. But also, if you think about it, when that behavior occurs, so Pigeon pecks, click happens, we've got the functioning as a reinforcer, but how does that that stimulus also function? It also has an antecedent function. So it also has an evoking function. It basically signals to the learner, if they turn their body now towards the little slot, food is available. Whereas if they turn their body at other times, food isn't available. So when you click, your clicker is functioning as a consequence, but it's also functioning essentially as a cue. Is signaling to the animal that if you turn towards me now, food or toys or whatever it is available to you. It doesn't always have to be food. It could be something else that's reinforcing. And so when we think about a clicker, think about the marker, I should be saying, rather than clicker. Think about the marker as having a consequence effect, but also an antecedent effect. And then it goes to, okay, how do I train a clicker, or how do I teach a clicker? Well, if you're thinking from it from an antecedent and a consequence perspective, it might suddenly change how you decide to teach it. I'm not going to go, we can go into that topic or discussion another day, but I just want to kind of put that out there. Okay, let's see what comments you guys have. So Cheryl says, great bit of shaping, definitely a great bit of shaping. I watched this, and maybe it's about 10 years ago now. And when I watched it, I remember a version of this, a Skinner shaping the pigeon to go round. I remember going, oh, I want to try that. And so with Cody, I sat down and I worked on a similar behavior. If you go on my YouTube channel, you might be able to see. I don't know if I can do it now. Let's see if I'm able to. If I share, let me try this actually. YouTube. I just found it. Give me one moment and I'll pull up the right video. And this is something you guys can do with your pets, your cat, your dog, your bird at home. Maybe it could be something you could try this week, and then post videos and let us know how you get on. I thought it was on here. Let me... It's just, here we go, found it. Okay, let me share my screen so you guys can see it. Share screen, share Google tab, Cody spin. Oh, we want to share audio as well, and then share. There we go. Okay, so when I watched that video back in 2010, I go, okay, I'm going to teach a young Cody. I want to try something similar. So I set him up with his meal. Took a little bit longer than Skinner shaping his pigeon, but still not very long. The video is 6 minutes long. So I was trying to also do is shape this behavior with minimal extinction. So I didn't want extinction bursts. So I didn't want lots of, no, this is not working, barking, screaming type behaviors. And I wanted it kind of be a smooth movement, as opposed to I try this, and throwing 500 bits of behavior out. So there's variation in these head turns, and I'm trying to select from that variation. And Cody used to start barking and screaming and spinning in spinning in circles if something didn't happen that he was expecting to happen. So if there was a reinforcing previous outcome and that didn't work, he would literally scream and spin in circles. He'd do that outside as well when he's outside in a walk. And so I'm working here is about maybe under a year still, working on shaping behaviors and creating a reinforcement history where that behavior isn't practiced, and I'm shaping responding in ways which is a lot calmer. So that was another part of doing this exercise with him.
Boy, very nice.
Okay. So if you're interested in trying to do something similar, then maybe it's just good practice. It gets really good at practicing what information are you giving with your face, your eyes, your hand movements, because every time you move your hand, essentially it's a condition reinforcer. And so what information are you giving your learner? And can you just use a specific marker? It could be the movement of your hand if you want it to be. It could be a sound. It could be a light, some kind of change, and then shape that behavior and see what you can do. So you guys can practice that this week. Okay, let's see what else we've got. So yes, Lisa Tonk says shaping behavior with reinforcement. And I think, Lisa, the other thing to think about here as well, which is a really good point, is when I think about shaping, what's going on here is we're using shaping through successive approximations. So shaping with small steps that the animal's successful with as we go through. And then there's a few more things I want to talk about when it comes to shaping, but I'll leave them. And then as we go through this video, we can come back and discuss that a little bit more. So, well, let's try what we can to make Chirag do if we deliver the stars contingently. We'll soon figure out whether we have a functional reinforcer. That's hilarious. I remember teaching, it's really funny actually, just talking about that. When I was teaching classes, running puppy classes regularly, I used to take on young trainers and students come in and help with the puppy classes and try and get them teaching and doing puppy classes and coach them. And one of my students then, he's an excellent trainer now. And I remember he was teaching this class, and I was sitting there in the background, and I think Cody was with me, and I can't remember if he was. But when he was speaking and teaching, his voice was very muted. And so with the acoustics of the hall that we were in, it was really hard to hear. And obviously he's teaching, I'm thinking, okay, how can I use positive reinforcement to drive this behavior and change this behavior without going and interrupting? So rather, because it'd be embarrassing and quite punishing if you go up and go, can you speak a bit louder, or can you just stop? I want to just give you some feedback while you're teaching a real life class. And so it could have been that maybe I've just asked for too much, and so I should have broken it into smaller pieces. But you've got to balance it sometimes. And so I had a clicker on me, and in the puppy class we weren't using clickers, but I had a clicker on me. So what I started doing is, and we hadn't discussed this beforehand, anytime I heard any kind of projection, I would click. And I was sitting slightly further away from all the puppy caregivers, so it didn't disturb them probably too much, but there was a sound, and I just sat there. Every time I heard projection, click. Now, obviously, this trainer knew what a clicker was and was familiar with clickers, but we hadn't discussed using it to train people and things like that. And at the end of the class, and what actually happened, what I observed was his projection was louder and louder until it was really clear and everyone can hear. And then at the end in our debrief, I asked, okay, so what were your observations? And he said to me, oh, when I heard you click, I thought you were clicking when I was saying things correctly. And so as I got that, as that reinforcement process was occurring, I felt more confident. And so positive reinforcement equates to confidence. And so he goes, oh, I relaxed and I felt more confident. So what the point of this is, I was actually clicking projection. So anytime I heard projection, I wasn't clicking accuracy of information. What he thought was he was being clicked for, and the effect of what actually happened. So I was clicking projection and I got projection. The behavior of projection happening and that voice being clear occurred. But Skinner noted in his works that an animal doesn't have to be consciously aware that parts of their behaviors are being reinforced for reinforcement to occur. So you don't have to be consciously aware that something's being reinforced. And so often, because we have verbal behavior, we're able to start constructing different thinking patterns and different things. And so often we might go, well, I was learning this and I was learning that, but actually it doesn't really matter what we think. What matters is the data, and that's the behavior and the change in behavior. And so it's really interesting when you take that away, like learn how many habits do we have as an individual where we go, oh yeah, no one taught me to do that. Oh, I taught myself, or I'm just good at that naturally. Is it that you're just good at it naturally, or is it that the environment somehow is shaping that behavior and you're not aware consciously, or you're not aware like how it's being shaped, or that the shaping's occurring? So you call it it's just natural talent. But actually, if we objectively looked at it and you took a step back and you watch video, you'd go, actually there's shaping occurring. So with our dogs as well, people often like, I want my dog to know that he's doing something. I want my dog to be consciously aware. You don't need an animal to be consciously aware of what they're physically doing in the moment to increase behavior. And I'm not saying you don't want those effects and you don't you want to use them in different situations, but you don't need a learner to be going, I'm fully aware of what I'm doing and that I'm being reinforced for this in order for reinforcement to be effective, is essentially the summary of that. I could have just said that last sentence rather than going the long way around it, but hopefully the long way around it kind of made a bit of sense. So yes, you don't have to be aware of it, but your little comment just made me think about that in puppy class. And I heard this trainer present at Crufts last year, and I was so proud because he was giving a talk or doing a demonstration, and he was talking, and his projection was there, and it was amazing. Maria says, think, do, plan, training in the now. Exactly. That's Bob Bailey often says, think, do, plan, and training is about the now. Not what happened yesterday or last week, or what we thought the animal was doing previously. And so often we're in our head spaces so much when we're training. We're like, well, the dog did this before, so I'm not going to reinforce anything else. Before doesn't matter. What we've got is behavior and the current environment. So you need to be present and go, what do I have now? What do I want? So where am I now? Where do I want to go? And then what do I do to get from point A to point B? So if you've got a dog who could do a hand target yesterday, but the dog's sitting there looking at you a bit blank, don't just stand there going, I'm just going to wait because yesterday a dog could do this. We could wait, but that's just kind of waste of time, because equally what you could do is go, under this current environment, which is not the same as yesterday, because today the dog might have had less sleep, might not have eaten or eaten more or less. Maybe the dog went for a walk yesterday and they didn't today. Maybe the dog peed beforehand, they didn't today. Maybe the dog didn't have any pain yesterday and today they have more pain. Or maybe yesterday they weren't the hormones weren't all over the place and today they are. So we might not be able to see certain things and we go, well, it's the same room, but the internal environment might not be the same. So rather than going, well, everything's the same, I'm not going to reinforce. Well, not reinforcing doesn't strengthen behavior. What strengthens behavior is reinforcement. So if you have something now, don't worry about what happened yesterday. What you want to observe is, what have I got now? Where do I want to go? And how am I going to get there? And how am I going to get there is essentially a reinforcement process, a shaping process with or without prompts. And so focus on that. And within minutes, you're going to have a learner who's hand targeting again. But just because you reduced your criteria based on this behavior, you might reinforce a little movement and then a bit more. Within minutes, you have this. Whereas otherwise, you just have this and you're just waiting the animal out, and potentially you get frustrated. The animal's not very happy in that situation. What's the benefit? So yeah, another little side tangent that I think is useful. Okay, so let's see what we got. So many comments. I love comments because it means that we're engaging rather than just talking without anything. Okay, so Lisa Tonk says primary reinforcer is the food. Yes, essentially you could say the primary reinforcer is the food, and then you're pairing a neutral stimulus like your click sound or a flash of a light, and then that becomes a condition reinforcer. And condition reinforcer, learnt reinforcer, some people look at, okay, what's primary, what's secondary, what's tertiary. Generally in day-to-day training, we don't need to worry about any of that. We can just think about, is something reinforcing without learning, or is something needs to be paired and taught to be reinforcing? And if it needs to be taught to be reinforcing, then we need to make sure we're maintaining those backup reinforcers to keep that stimulus reinforcing. Otherwise, it will lose value over time. And then you can ask the question about, should you click every time you click, or should you treat every time you click? Another conversation. We'll get into it another day. So Cheryl was saying, I call it loading up the clicker. Exactly, Cheryl. People call it loading up the clicker. What I want you to think about now is, you may already have thought about this, but if you haven't, take my comment that I said earlier, which was the click has an antecedent function and it has a consequence function. Now start to think, based on how you look at attaching cues to things, attaching cues to behaviors, or how you change cues that attach to behaviors. Think about that and think about, how do you want to load the clicker in the same way that you've been doing so, or might you change it? And what are the pros and cons? Not saying it's right or wrong, but it'd be worth thinking about. Lisa said, where's the clicker? Essentially, the click here in this scenario, the marker is the sound of the food, the magazine, and the change with the light. So exactly, the whirling of the click, treat and train, the manners minder, similar thing. I want to use shaping to teach my dog to shut the door. I'm going to give it a go. That's a really good point. I think about, essentially, often we're shaping all the time. Whatever we're doing is shaping, and we're either shaping with a prompt or without a prompt. And so I said I'd talk about that in a little while, and so we'll get on to that in a little while. But exactly, just think about how are you going to set your shaping plan up and where you're going to go with that. And then post a video and tag us in so we can see you shaping that behavior. So Lucas says the clicker is an antecedent, like an MO or establishing operation, potentially also a discriminative stimulus, I think, because it signals to the learner that certain reinforcer is now available contingent on a certain behavior or a group of behaviors. So what I mean there is you click. Now there's a cue function, like when you say sit, butt hits the floor, food is available. When you hear the click, turn towards me, station calmly, food is available, depending on what you've taught that click to mean. So because, for example, you say, well, my dog doesn't have to do anything. When I click, they get a treat. But if you clicked and your dog grabbed hold of your arm or started biting your trouser, are you still going to feed? There are behaviors contingent on that click and the treat. So you hear the click, there's a class of behaviors that it may not be a set topography the way it looks. So your dog turns and stands and looks in one direction. It may be that your dog turns and sits, or your dog turns and moves their head forward or moves nose to hand, and you accept all of those topographies. But there's also certain topographies of behavior that you're not going to back up with a reinforcer on that cue. So the click of the cue, it signals that turning, standing, feet on the floor, head certain distance, these behaviors were likely to get you a treat now. And it also backs up your sort of click food pairing. And so the click remains functional as a condition reinforcer. I'm using quite a lot of jargon. This is more of a geeky type session, but if you do have any questions on those, just ask me to expand more. And if there's a certain topic that because some of these topics we can talk about for hours, and then we won't get through this half-an-hour video anywhere near half an hour. So yeah, if you want more information, just say so. Maggie says, I'm going to try this when the chickens are out of lockdown. Perfect. I'm sure the chickens will enjoy it. So Maria says, how comes you don't give the treat in the right way? Why not click behavior reinforced position? So I like the fact that you've put right in air quotes. What is right and what's wrong? So again, there's a couple of different reasons why. So potentially, yes. So again, I think it's a Bob Bailey saying, is click for behavior, pay for position, or pay in a way that's going to promote that behavior to occur. Like the way you present your reinforcer, it's not just here to treat, but the way you present it, where you present it, how you present it is all going to influence making it more valuable and giving the animal more clear information as to this is a behavior that we'd like to see more often in the future. And so the reason in that situation that I paid just in front of me was because when I watched that video, the Skinner Pigeon video, I was going, hold on a sec. Okay, so I knew, like, I was feeding in positions for certain behaviors because it made it more likely, but I just wanted to try something different to what I was doing. And also to really go, is my clicker valuable enough of information that it can shape that behavior? And essentially, like you got in the Skinner box, you're not getting fed for position, but you can still get really good behavior in good time. And so that's what I was going for. And so that's why in that video clip, I'm not feeding to the, like in the position, I'm feeding right in front of me and then using the sound of the click as my condition reinforcer. It's a very good question, Maria. So these are the kind of questions I think we should be thinking about and asking, because the more we question these things, the better trainers we become. Thank you, Sarah, and thank you, Jenna. So Alexa says, successive approximations for me as close to errorless learning as possible. This is exactly the point. And so, well, actually, rather than waiting for later, just live in the now, I was going to kind of mention this point later on, but this idea that definitely, so when we're talking about shaping, we're talking about shaping through successive approximations, essentially. Often in dog training, you hear the terminology free shaping. And so free shaping, shaping where trainers essentially talking about your shaping without a target or without luring. So like you saw in that video with Cody turning of the pigeon here, we could essentially label that as free shaping. However, just to note that this is a term that's been kind of invented by dog trainers. It's not in the behavioral analytic literature. And so and again, what we want to think about here, what I find and what I used to do as a trainer is think free shaping. So I would leave my animal out in the cold when I'm shaping. It would be really, I would look at it now and I think that's not a very good shaping session, because it's not close to it's not trial and success, it's trial and error. And actually what good shaping is, and you'll hear Skinner talk about this as we go through the video, is we're talking about shaping. And you can shape with or without prompts, so successive approximations, but there's nothing wrong with having a prompt. There's really no data to show that by using a target is bad or using a lure. There's this idea with dog training, especially like modern dog training, not modern dog training, but trainers, like we're so passionate about these ideas that you hear people say, you want the dog to work it out, or you don't want to use like a lure is bad or target is bad. But why? If it's information to a learner on how they can succeed, and it reduces stress, it reduces frustration, it feels better, and the animal's set up to succeed, it's just part of your antecedent arrangement or your environmental arrangement. I think good use of luring or targets are really beneficial, and I would heavily recommend to anyone, if you need it, use it. Arrange your environment. If you don't need the prompt, don't use it. But if you need if you can't arrange the environment otherwise, there's nothing wrong with a prompt. Use it, use it, use it, use it, use it. Just use it thoughtfully, because when you add a lure in, when people say I'm adding a lure, what are you doing in terms of what behavior are you reinforcing the moment you present that piece of food, or when you present that target? What's the antecedent function? What's the consequence function of presenting that target? And actually, mentioning that, Teresa McKeon and Joan Orr's daughter, who's a behavior analyst, Anna, I can't remember her surname, Anne's surname, and myself are doing a session on targeting and looking at some of these things in more detail for a conference that's happening online. And so I'm going to post some details in the comments later. So go check it out. It's called Convergence of Human, Animal, and Technology, ChatCon. It's called ChatCon. So I'll post details below anyway after this thing. Go check it out. But we're going to go into detail. Anne is a behavior analyst working with children with sort of autism and other children on the spectrum. And then Teresa tag teach, and then myself will come in from an animal perspective. We're going to be looking at all of those things. And so essentially, when we're talking about that, what we're talking about is trial and success. So when you're looking at setting up successive approximations, your learner should be able to access success rather than this idea of trial and error. A lot of people think about training as trial and error, and actually that's not what training is. And again, when we listen to Skinner, we'll come back to this point, because Skinner makes this point, is shaping learning is about trial and success. Teresa McKeon, thank you very much. So it's Anne Warmold, and so thank you very much. Okay. Just going through you guys' comments again and seeing what we've got going on. Accidental angry emoji. Thank you very much. When I watch it later, I'll be like, oh my god, why is there an angry emoji? And I was like, okay, it's accidental. So we've got Helen says, oh, I love your picture, Helen. Beautiful shaping, no extinction. Are you purposefully delivering the reinforcement to cue orientation back to you for the next repetition? Yes. So part of the, like I mentioned, the delivery strategy is to get that orientation after you hear the click, but also I watched the video with Skinner doing it, and I was like, oh, I'm just going to feed in one place as opposed to feeding in position, and just to experiment and observe data and see what's happening. So Claire says, in this video, there is a noise from the food dispenser, both when the hatch opens and when it closes. Is a noise of sorts, is the noise of it closing an antecedent? Definitely, Claire. So that's a really good, hi, Claire, by the way. Claire Williams runs an animal shelter, or manages an animal shelter, and does amazing, amazing, amazing stuff in that shelter. So definitely worth checking out Claire and her work. So yes, Claire, so definitely thinking about when that closes, where does it sit? So there's, because essentially we've never just got a clean ABC. You're always getting behavior happening all the time, and so it's going to happen either before or after a response, and sometimes in both places. So when that lid goes down, potentially that could be a signal that signals to the learner, now turn and repeat the behavior that you were doing a moment ago, and more food will appear. So it could have become an SD or a cue to say more food will be available contingent on this behavior, depending on what contingencies it's being shaped with. So definitely it could be possible to do that, yes. Okay. Definitely trial and success is what it's all about when we talk about training. And we'll listen to that again in a second. We'll come back onto that in a little bit of time. Yes, ABC. So ABC, antecedent, behavior, consequence. If you are unsure of what that means, if you look back at my video, last week's video on YouTube, someone asked it and I posted a comment, a link to an article that explains that in more detail. So if you go to YouTube, type in Chirag Patel Consulting, find last week's video, and in the comments, I've posted a link, and I'll try and post it here as well later on. Okay, so let's go back to the video.
We're getting the beginnings of a counterclockwise turn. There we are.
Yeah. Come on, Pigeon.
A little bit more and he'll go all the way around, I think.
There, I made it. That didn't take him very long, Dr.
No,
Skinner.
that's pretty fair. It varies a good deal because, of course, I have to wait for the behavior in order to reinforce it. People don't realize this, especially in working with children. You must wait until the child does something to reinforce it to get the effect.
And you feel that this kind of reward or reinforcement plays a very real part.
So just going to pause there for a second, because the idea that, okay, you have to wait for behavior to occur. You do wait for behavior to occur. However, we also know now the effects of the antecedent environment on behavior, and the way you arrange the antecedent environment can promote, and motivating, like including motivating operations, can promote behavior to occur. And so the idea that you can take a horse to water but you can't make them drink, well, you probably could. You could set it up so drinking is more likely to occur. So if that horse was made to run backwards and forwards and then taken to water, the likelihood of drinking behavior occurring is probably going to be way more likely. And so you can use your antecedent arrangements to promote behaviors. And so that's again where you might use a target. You might already have a lure or some bait placed somewhere, so when the learner walks in, so for a chin rest behavior with a dog, for example, if I'm going to have them do a chin rest on a chair, I often place some food on the chair, and I'll do that before the dog's in the room. Dog walks into the room, I walk with the dog towards the chair. As they come to the chair, there's none of this hanging around, trial and error. The dog's head might go here, might go here, might go there, might do this. If I've got food in the chair, I approach the chair, dog smells the food, goes to eat the food. As the dog's eating the food, as they finish the last piece of food, click and reinforce. And so essentially I'm able to get, using a bait, using food there in the first place, a lure, get the behavior happening. And then I'm able to start reinforcing rather than just standing at the chair, waiting for maybe an hour, half an hour, and having a learner who presents 50,000 different behaviors, and there's a lot of extinction occurring. So you can set the environment up for the learner to succeed. You don't just have to stand there and wait. There's really no benefit, and the science doesn't support just standing there and waiting. So arrange the environment for your learner to succeed.
In human behavior as well as that of pigeons.
Very definitely. We have not as much experimental evidence with the human subject, but we have a good deal. And the principles that have emerged from this kind of research do hold remarkably well.
Now, a pigeon, of course, is simpler than a human being. How complex can you make pigeons' behavior?
Well, it's a matter simply of my own patience. You can slowly shape almost any kind of behavior. 2 or 3 years ago, in a classroom demonstration, just to see what we could do, we designed a little piece of apparatus in which 2 pigeons could play ping pong. The 2 pigeons are at either end of a small ping pong table. One pigeon pecks the ball as it comes toward him and knocks it toward the other pigeon. Other pigeon pecks the ball back across the table. If it goes past one pigeon, the other pigeon can eat, and if it goes the other way, the other pigeon eats. So that there is it's a real game. The pigeon is reinforced for a cross-court shot if that is what gets the ball past his opponent.
That's remarkable.
Of course, we're not interested in behavior because it's amusing or dramatic. We want to study its causes and find out how to change it.
We're not interested in behavior because it's amusing or dramatic, but all this work was done. Now you may look at that and go, oh my God, that's so cool, or that's funny. But again, there was a learning a component to this. So how do you study competition as opposed to going inside the animal's psyche or head, going how can we understand competition from a reinforcement perspective? And so Skinner's able to set up an experiment and be able to start studying the behaviors. And it's so interesting if you look at some more detail of some of these works, when we go, well, when this happens, the person gets all angry and then they like march away, or they might stomp their feet. And then with the pigeons, you start seeing if the pigeon starts losing, there'll be certain behaviors that occur, and you might go, oh, look, the pigeons become angry, or the pigeons demonstrating these behaviors. But again, all of this research was crucial and also very useful to start being able to study what's going on in terms of the changes in the environment, and also what that could reflect in terms of the changes that are happening in the internal environment and the way the animal's feeling and potentially what they're thinking. Obviously, you don't know if you can't ask them.
Actually, our experiments are run automatically by rather complicated equipment. Each of these panels contains relays, timers, clocks, and so on, which turn on stimuli, arrange for reinforcement, and record the bird's behavior. Each panel controls an apparatus in the next room. Here are 20 boxes, each of which contains complete equipment for studying the behavior of a pigeon or any other small animal. Here, for example, a pigeon is being put into the apparatus for its daily run. In this case, we are studying how behavior changes when we make the pigeon more or less hungry. By feeding it different amounts of food daily, we can change its body weight and study the effect of this on its behavior.
So oftentimes you hear people go, oh yeah, so all the pigeons were just starved, and like all the animals aren't always that hungry. And so the data from Skinner's work and people that have done work after him is invalid essentially. And what we've learned from his work is not valid in today's data, like it's just irrelevant and the data is not good enough. But actually, if you start looking at it closely, it's not just all the animals were starved at a certain level. There's changes and manipulation to go, okay, so if the animals are more or less hungry, they're fed more or less, the body weight is changed, how does their behavior change? And also, do the principles, these are the underlying things, like principles of reinforcement and extinction, all these other things, are they still true? And so again, what was found was a lot of these principles still are occurring and are still true, regardless of these variations in changes of those other conditions. So when someone goes, well, all the we don't starve our dogs this much, so then what was learned in the laboratories is actually invalid. I would argue against that, because actually the research wasn't just animals were fed a certain amount of food. There's also experiments going on to look at, okay, the food is changed and the animal's more or less hungry, and actually the principles, what we learn, are still true and still are effective and still work.
In this box, we're studying the color vision of the pigeon. We reinforce it for pecking the key when it is one color and not when it is another. This work is related to research on those substances in the eye which enable us to see color. No one really cares about why pigeons peck discs. However, it enables us to study the behavior because the response will operate automatic equipment to record.
I think that is so cool. Again, when people go, oh, this research is just about training pigeons to do, rats to press a lever. Actually, operant conditioning and behavior science and Skinner's work has huge scope in terms of, there we're talking about looking and studying color vision, what a pigeon can see through reinforcement and all those principles. And so it's not just about being able to train animals to press a lever, but actually this work was, for me, mind-blowing. You look at it and you go, wow, they're actually using teaching and training to establish and learn about the organism and the species and how they perceive the world around them. And so this technology and the science has a massive scope to actually change lives and make a difference and actually understand the learners that we're living with.
And program sequences of events. A paper tape simply moves very slowly over this cylinder, and a pen will move one small step across the paper as the pigeon responds. The bird then draws a line, the slope of which depends upon how fast it's going, enabling us to follow changes in the bird's behavior over a period of time. All this apparatus is run right around the clock, and as a result, we record and analyze hundreds of hours of behavior every day on a wide variety of subjects. Perhaps if we went to the laboratory of my colleague, Dr. Hernstein, we could see something a little closer to the actual experimental work that we carry on in these laboratories.
We reinforce the bird for pecking when the light is on, but when the light is off, the bird is not reinforced for pecking. As you see, the light comes to control his behavior. When the light is on, he pecks. When it's off, he doesn't. This process we call stimulus discrimination.
So I want to just sort of look at this idea about the light controlling behavior. And here again, the word controlling isn't from a popular use of the term that we talk about always like it's a bad word to use. We're not trying to control the dog, but essentially antecedent stimuli do have control over behavior, because certain things will happen and change with behavior based on previous learning history and also consequences. And so the light has control over that bird's behavior based on the previous reinforcement history. And I think that's really important to remember, because the light isn't magic. When we say I'm going to tell my dog to sit or give the command sit, and that's why we don't tend to use the word command, is the word doesn't really make the dog do anything per se. It's what's the reason why the word is meaningful is because of all the history of attachment and pairing to reinforcement for a certain behavior when the word sit is said, or if you sort of give a signal and the dolphin goes and jumps, if you just kept giving this signal, soon you'll probably find the dolphin will stop jumping, because what's maintaining the strength of that stimulus to control behavior is that relation to its consequence. So your antecedent, your cue fits in there, and then the relationship it has with the behavior and the consequence is what's keeping that, giving it power essentially to be able to control behavior. So when we go, well, the light isn't working, it's the pigeon, I don't know, say with the pigeon here, the light happens and the pigeon doesn't respond how you want it to. What do? Do you make the light brighter? Or actually what you need to do is don't focus so much on the light. What we need to do is focus on what makes the light valuable, which is that pairing of the behavior, consequence, contingency. So that's what we really need to focus on. And that's the same, like I hear a lot of people go, you need to have a really loud voice and you need to be able to go, Rover, come, and you need to have do your chicken wing expression and wave your arms around. But actually, we have to remember it's not the antecedent and the cues that control behavior in terms of long term. They only get their value, their controlling powers, because of the consequence, attachment to consequences. So with a dog, you don't need to be screaming and waving your arms around. What you need to be able to do is establish a good BC relationship. So behavior consequence relations. So behavior, run to me lots of hot dogs, run to me lots of hot dogs. And then you can say, Rover, here, run to me lots of hot dogs. And soon you could whisper, Rover, here. But because whispering Rover here has such a strong reinforcement history with running to you at a certain speed, that whatever you've conditioned, that signal is going to be just as effective. So your cues need to be clear and perceivable by the individual, that you want to be able to perceive them. However, they don't need to be loud. They don't need to be squeaky. They don't need to be over the top. And in our classes, my classes, I stopped many years ago. I used to go with people. I was like, you need to be more exciting. You need to have a higher pitch tone. And I was like, I remember going to a workshop and someone saying to me, I was at the workshop as a attendee, as a student, and someone said to me, you need to be more exciting. And I just felt so punished in that environment, and I felt so embarrassed. And it made me think, actually, for my human learners, why is it that you need to say to a human client, you need to be more exciting? Actually, that tells us that, no, we're misunderstanding behavior science here. It's not you need to be more exciting as an antecedent that drives behavior. what drives behavior is consequences. Now, if the exciting is a consequence that's going to make the behavior occur, I can understand that. But actually saying you need to be more exciting, call your dog, maybe you've set the dog up if it's a recall. So in dog training classes, often what we do is like what I used to do is used to have like a puppy on one end, human on the other end, other dogs are in my class along the side, and then you kind of trial and error. The puppy gets to its person. Actually, why set the puppy up to fail and then the human has to be loud and over exaggerated? Why not start them up really close and where the puppy succeeds? And so behavior consequence pairing is very reliable, and then start to get more distance, and then no one has to be screaming and going all excited. So now I don't say to my clients you need to be more exciting. I just go, okay, my client offers this behavior, whatever is reinforcing the learning history, they're saying good dog, treat. Well, that's fine, because all I can do is say to my client, when you say good dog, give a few pieces of hot dog. Very quickly, when they say good dog, their dog is going to wag tail and go, oh my God, I'm going to get some hot dogs. So good dog could just be as valuable as good dog, because sometimes you could say good dog and just give a piece of kibble. Whereas if you say good dog and give 5 pieces of hot dog, depending on how valuable hot dogs and kibble are for that individual, you're probably going to be able to condition good dog meaning really good stuff and good dog meaning, oh, it's okay, I only get a bit of kibble. So for us to think about how that works, I think it's really important to think about that. There's loads of good comments. Let's just go through some of them as well. Sorry if I skip some. Okay, so who asked me about, I think it was Key that asked me about the ABCs. I've posted this link in the comments. It's from Dr. Susan Friedman on her website. It goes through ABCs, so that should give you more information about ABCs if you're interested. And then Merch says, or possibly a cue, as food is already finished by the bird and the closing indicates the opportunity antecedent as to earn. Exactly, definitely, Merch. We discussed that previously, and I would agree. Key says, I remember a trainer telling me that before training session, make sure your dog is hungry. And again, I remember used to saying to clients, feed your dog this many hours before you come to class. Now, again, I just think weighing up ethics and welfare, and also what effects do we want? Do I want a dog who's so super hungry? And again, it depends on the individual as well, because you could have 4 dogs and you feed, if you don't, all the 4 dogs, you don't feed them 2 hours before training session, or you don't feed them 2 hours before training session, and there's going to be different behaviors, because dog 1 could show what he goes crazy over food if he hasn't had food for 2 hours, whereas dog 4, even with 2 hours of food, they're like, yeah, whatever. And again, age, metabolic rate, all of these other things are going to be factors and MOs in how valuable something is as a reinforcer. And again, remember, this is about the individual. So it's not just about, well, starve your dogs 4 hours before a class or 2 hours before a class. We need to be looking at the individuals and the effects it has on those individuals. And then look at, okay, if I withhold food from a dog for 8 hours, is that ethical? And then also, if I withhold food from this particular dog for this many hours, how does it influence their behavior? And how does it influence the behavior today? And then tomorrow or next week or next year, it might be different. So you have to change your strategy based on what you observe in the moment. So it's always worth asking. And sometimes you've just got a learner who's so focused on that food, we're not able to get slower behaviors, and you might want slower behaviors, or you don't find that the dog is learning what you're trying to teach because they're just so focused on getting that food. So it just depends on the individual and making sure we're training in an ethical way. Karen says, if it would be a punisher, you'd see behavior diminishing. So I think someone asked earlier, and I missed a comment, but is the food thing closing a punisher? Again, the best thing to do, like Karen says here, is we need to observe behavior. And so is the pigeon's behavior decreasing, or does the pigeon's behavior maintain? And so punishment and reinforcement is not defined by what we think is punishing or reinforcing. It's defined by the effect on behavior. And so what we need to do is observe observe the individual's behavior to answer that question. So when someone says to you, well, when that person grabbed the dog's collar or gave the dog a slap, that was a punishment. Not necessarily. It could have been aversive, it might not been, but what we need to do is go, what effect did it have on the dog's behavior? And then be able to go, now it doesn't, just because it has an effect or it doesn't have an effect doesn't mean it's good or bad, because it could be that actually doing a certain action to a dog is still maybe considered unethical. However, when it comes to definitions from a scientific perspective, we need to look at behavior to decide whether something's reinforcing or punishing. So Lavina says, a general fact, a lot of pigeons in research are held deprived to 80% of their free body weight. She's an ex-researcher, and that's a really good point. And I think we do have to question when research comes out, what food deprivation was used for those animals, and was it tested that actually food deprivation is at different levels? The data still stands up to it. And what I was trying to say in my last sort of comment was, what we're looking at with the research here that we're looking at is the animals at different food deprivation levels, reinforcement and extinction and things like that were still occurring. Those principles are still happening and effective. Molly says, I'm trying to put a behavior that is offered to a cue. They are doing the behavior when the cue is given successfully, and then a reward is given for doing that behavior on cue. If the behavior is offered without being cued or requested, no reward is given. That will decrease the animal's desire from doing the behavior when cued. So Molly, it's a really interesting question here. And again, depends on sort of how you look at it and how you phrase it. But what I would suggest is, potentially you can, but then there's going to be other effects. So you can look at how does the animal potentially feel in those situations when there's certain extinction situations occurring, and could we do something else that still establishes stimulus control, but also is actually doesn't cause those levels of frustration sometimes. And so one thing I tend to think about with my learners is when I'm giving a certain, presenting a certain cue or changing a cue in the environment for a certain behavior consequence relation, when I'm not going to present that cue, I'm going to reinforce or ask for something else. So I've got a previous established behavior, a base behavior. It could be stationing, or it could be asking for a target or something. And then I can ask for the other behavior that I'm working on at changing the cue or establishing the cue. And when I'm not going to offer that cue, rather than just wait for the animal to offer a behavior and fail, I'm going to ask for another behavior instead. So they start learning under this condition is when spinning pays off. But otherwise, it's better to just station calmly, because that's the cue you're giving. You're helping them out with that information. They're succeeding. And then you're reinforcing those two different responses under those two different conditions. That's how I would think about it. So Claire says, thank you for name check, Chirag. You've just retired from the National Animal Welfare Trust. And so, but Claire is still worth checking out. And then the work she's doing at the National Animal Welfare Trust is amazing. So hopefully we've answered Molly's question there. So that hopefully makes a little bit of sense. And we've got some comments here. Stacy says, I tell them they should call the dog the way they will actually call the dog, maybe with a little fear or annoyance in your voice. It's a fire drill. So yeah, just with my clients, when you're working on, rather than going, you need to be exciting, just have them, like if you arrange the environment for them to practice in situations. So let's go to a park, guys, or let's put up a radio so that there's background noise. So you're in the park, there's kids playing. So let's put up a radio in class. So we arrange the environment for the person to behave as they would when there's a background noise like that. And so then we're going to offer those kinds of responses of saying the word louder so it doesn't surprise the dog when the dog hears it for the first time. Hi, Anna. Anna says, love it. Thank you for offering these sessions, Chirag, and hashtag thank you, Skinner. I will have to go, but as a behavior geek, I'll definitely come back and watch the replay. Perfect. Okay. So someone asked, what's EMOs? Establishing motivating operations, or establishing operations are part of MOs. So again, if you, we covered this a little bit in the first week's video. So if you go back and find week's 1 recording, you'll find more information about that, or Google motivating operations.
The control exerted by comes to control his behavior. When the light is on, he pecks. When it's off, he doesn't. This process we call stimulus discrimination. The control exerted by that light over the bird's behavior can be very strong, as you can see.
Yes.
There are comparable situations in human behavior. We've learned to cross the street when the light is green, and not to cross the street when the light is red.
Well, some of us have, Dr. Herrnstein. There's still a good many people who cross the street on a red light.
That's because they get away with it occasionally.
That's true.
If we let the bird get away with it, he would do it too.
As a matter of fact, that's a good example of another type of work we do here with this particular type of experimentation. The things we do in everyday life don't always pay off, and they don't always not pay off. It isn't simple all or none. We are often intermittently reinforced, and there are various schedules according to which what we do can be reinforced intermittently. We study that, in the case of the pigeon, by arranging various schedules or systems of payoff.
The bird is on what we call a slow-down schedule. In order to be reinforced, the bird must wait at least 10 seconds before he pecks. This indicator here shows the seconds going by. It has to go all the way to 10, and then a peck is reinforced. If he pecks too soon, he must start waiting all over again.
It takes a lot of patience.
This is a very hard schedule for any sort of animal.
Including man.
He made it, didn't he?
Yes, he did.
Yeah.
Can you build this bird up to a fixed ratio?
Well, I'll try.
What do you mean by a fixed ratio?
Well, that's our term for what in industry would be called a piece rate or piecework pay.
The bird is reinforced for every 10 pecks he makes. There, he was reinforced.
And you feel, Dr. Skinner, there's an analogy with piecework in a factory to this?
Yes, the human worker is often paid off in terms of the number of items he produces, the number of times he operates a press, something of that sort. As a matter of fact, a very similar schedule is a sort of piecework where you can't quite predict the next payoff, but one will occur in time, and that is the heart of all gambling apparatuses. The so-called variable ratio schedule, which is built into all gambling devices and produces with human subjects, just as it does with pigeons, a very high disposition to continue to operate a device, like a slot machine, and a tendency which, by the way, continues a long time in extinction when the device no longer pays off at all.
Now, you're trying to deduce laws of behavior for all organisms from this kind of work. Would you say that this lack of free will in the pigeon also means that human beings don't have free choices in what they do?
Clinical psychology, scientific psychology, economics, political science, and so on, all contribute to the total evidence that there are external causes of human behavior which, in a sense, do explain the behavior. Now, we are by no means in position to argue at the moment that all human behavior is controlled, but that would seem to be the goal in which scientific research is drifting.
And that a...
Okay, so I let that video go on a little bit because I thought whenever, there's a whole conversation we could be having about schedules and talking about schedules, but that could be another day's conversation. And so I thought we're getting to about 1 hour 30 minutes now, and although it's going to be recorded, it's a good time, I think, if we kind of stopped for today, or we'll go through your questions or comments that have come in, but then if we stop now, then we can do pretty much the other half of this video, and there's some really cool stuff coming up. And so if we stop here now, the next Sunday, same place, same time, we can go through and carry on the video and spend another night with Skinner. And it's actually Skinner's birthday is coming up, so that's going to be in 2 weeks' time. So we can do another one then as well. So let's see what you guys are saying. So like I mentioned before, welfare considerations and things are different now, and we're going to always get, like I say, this video is about 60 years old, and so what we might consider fair now, it may not be fair then, or what is considered fair then might not be fair now. So Maria says, is a low rate of reinforcement good learning? I've learned that rate should be high. Or is it a bit of negative reinforcement consequence that help the bird to learn? I think it's not about... it depends, because if you just look at the word rate of reinforcement, that's a really interesting idea in terms of, like, we're all taught high rates, and sometimes what I think happens, and what happened with me, is that you just almost do desperation clicks or reinforcers. So you're like, oh, my rates should be high. So you just start feeding things, and essentially what starts happening is you give very unclear information to the learner, because then you're reinforcing things that you don't want, or maybe you don't want to stay at that criteria for very long. You end up reinforcing because you go, oh, the rate's fallen too low. So yes, we want a high rate, but not necessarily just a high rate. What you want is, you want to be able to arrange environments that are successful for the learner, and those successive approximations are occurring, so the steps are small enough that the learner succeeds, and you're able to keep progressing to go in the direction that you want. And because of the way you set the environment up, remember, it's about trial and success rather than trial and error. If we set that up for the learner, what happens is you have a high rate of reinforcement. So yes, you want a high rate of reinforcement, but don't try to just do high rate of reinforcement by going feed. What you need to do is look at, like with other things we've talked about, is arrange the environment up for success, and look at small steps the learner can take, but they're successful each time, and the learner accesses reinforcers all the way through. So yeah, when you look at, you want high rates of reinforcement, but not just for the sake of, like, you're feeding the animal. It's contingent on behavior and the way you've arranged the environment. Okay, so let's see what we've got. Other comments. So I love you guys' questions. Thank you so much for all the comments and posting questions and discussion points. It makes it really interesting. Hopefully you don't mind me blubbering on. And we get to discuss, or you get to hear me talk, and also we get to watch Skinner. But there's so much. I watch these videos and I could literally stop at every minute and go, that's so interesting, I want to learn more. Or what does he mean here? Or actually, what does that mean? Let me go and find some more research. And then you go down like a YouTube rabbit hole or a research paper rabbit hole. So yeah, it's great. I think it's great. Just going to go through some of these. So he says 4:09 p.m. Eastern Standard Time next Sunday. It will be 8:30 p.m. Greenwich GMT, Greenwich mean Greenwich time. Yeah, 8:30 p.m. UK time next week on Sunday is when we'll carry this conversation on. And like I say, there's some really saucy, cool stuff coming up. So I was thinking we just go and carry on watching it, but actually I don't want to just rush through things. I'd rather stop and chat about it and go through and take our time. And so we shall do that next week. Next week, Sunday, 8:30 p.m. UK time. Zoe says, that's reinforcing and punishing. Sad to stop watching, but something to look forward to in the future. So yeah, it may be like, but what behavior does it punish? Or does it is it slightly aversive, or is it slightly like, oh, I don't like that, I want it to carry on? But actually it the experience, if we observe behavior, we see you turning up for the next session. So it's actually more reinforcing potentially, but it depends on what behavior we're looking at, I suppose. Yep, Stacey, a party for Skinner. Definitely. Thank you, Skinner. We should celebrate you. Thank you, Annabelle. Thank you, Cheryl. Thank you, Sarah. Alexa says, need to find last week's one and I'll be there. Last week's one is on YouTube, on my YouTube channel, and it's also on my Facebook page. If you just scroll down, you should be able to find it on there. Amazing, Colette. That's good to know. Claire says, have you just invented Skinner Sunday? Yeah, let's make it Skinner Sunday. I like it. Key says, I've always thought that the rate went with the individual goal of training, not haphazard. Exactly, definitely. So the rate is, we want to see a high rate, but also it's talking about, like I said, making sure we've got good successive approximations and behaviors occurring. But for some people, and like for me, I remember I'll stand there and I'll arrange my environment poorly for my learner. And then I'd be like, but I've been told the rate needs to be higher, or the person teaching would say, you need a higher rate of reinforcement. So then I'd be like, okay, I need a higher rate of reinforcement. So I'd be like, click tree, click tree, click tree. But I'm not actually giving clear information. I'm just starting to reinforce anything out of desperation. So I think it's just a good thing to think about. Stacey says, only for those of us west of Europe, for Chirag, it's Skinner Mondays. No, for me, it's still Sunday. So we're still on Sunday night, unless we go into midnight. So it'll still be Skinner Sunday for us as well. Jane says, thank you, Chirag, the quickest hour and a half of my week. Aw, thanks, Jane. Taking that as a compliment. Katie says, your blubbering on is my learning, so keep blubbering. Aw, thank you. I do love that picture, Helen. Molly Cutler, thank you, says 3:30 Eastern Standard Time. Mitch says, I've often found the more select use of rewards of highest value to the animal can work really well in the place of high rates of reinforcement. And so, yeah, I think that's, again, it's just this conversation is worth having and really thinking about what do we mean by high rates, and yeah, what are we relating that to, comparing it to? So many comments, which is amazing. I just don't want to lose them. Thank you, Sandy. Thank you, Lindsay. Thank you, Vio. Thank you, Julie. Thank you, Maria. Thank you for all your questions. Thank you, Nikki. Stacy, BF is my BFF. Thank you, Stacy. It's so amazing. People in different parts of the world, Australia, the States, we're all able to spend this time together and learn, discuss, and enjoy a Sunday together, Sunday evening, Sunday daytime. Thank you, Chirag. So good to look back at the science rather than just reading papers. I love videos and I love watching, and especially hearing the words coming out of the author's mouth and just seeing examples of it. I think it's great. Thank you, Tracy. Ruthie says, are we all bringing cake to Skinner's party in 2 weeks? That's a very good idea. I think we should all have a little cake with a little candle, and we can do like a little happy birthday. We'll talk more about that next week. We'll plan it. Thank you, Liz. Oh, Liz says, see you on Cats and Dogs at War. Yes, if you guys are in the UK, if you're out the UK, you need to use a VPN, and you can watch it. But it's a new TV show on 5 Star, and Monday nights 9 p.m. or it replays on Fridays at 7 p.m. UK time. So if you can watch it, have a watch. Tomorrow is episode 2 at 9 p.m. So please share it and watch it. Cheryl says, I've taught my puppy a down and a spin. When I'm eating, he offers me these behaviors. It does make me laugh how he offers the behaviors. It's a really good point. And again, we talk about how animals offer us certain behaviors. And sometimes if we want the animal to do something else, and like we talked about earlier, rather than just waiting for it to happen at a chance, let's give them that information as to what we'd like them to do instead, and then set them up for success. But it's great that when you reinforce those behaviors, they keep occurring. Julie says, and Prosecco, definitely. Gin, Prosecco. I wonder what Skinner's favorite drink was. We should try and email someone and find out. I was thinking maybe Dr. Julie Vargas, his daughter, would know, but that might be a bit odd. Hello, could you tell me what was your dad's favorite drink? Okay. Thank you, Lana. Francis says, gets more interesting the more I see of Skinner and you talking about it, though. Brilliant. Oh, thank you, Francis. Katie says, thank you so much for sharing your knowledge with us. Look forward to next week. I'm looking forward to next week, too. Hope you guys have an amazing week in between. Hi, Lindsay. Thank you very much. Hi, Rob. So Rob was a trainer. He's mentioned this, so I'm going to say his name. I was keeping it anonymous in case he didn't want me to say his name, but he's kind of insinuated the comment. So it was Rob Ellis who we did the clicker for the projection. Sorrel says, hi, thank you. Thank you very much, Sorrel. Yes to cake. Cake is amazing. Very enjoyable, and share this with everyone. And I love how you get excited about certain parts that really bring it alive. Thank you very much for these. Skinner behaviorism is so often misconstrued. I can't even speak now. It's good we're stopping. It's wonderful to see more discussion of BF's actual work. Definitely, I agree with you. I just see so much of the work misconstrued. You know what I'm saying. And yeah, I think this is good. We should share it with as many people as possible. Cool. So it looks like we're just having any alcohol welcome, a good little party in a couple of weeks' time. Well, hope you guys have an amazing week. Thank you so much for joining me tonight. It's been amazing. And I'm looking forward to carrying on this conversation, and we'll watch part 2 of this video next week. Bye.